Welcome, welcome. We have a full docket of info to dump tonight. Things that I haven't heard anyone else bringing up, at least not with all the dots connected. So we'll be getting into ties between a cashless society, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the Biden White House, trade policy, and the world's largest asset manager. Now, we've talked a lot in the past about the globalist move to a cashless society and how the World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Fund, and central banks around the world have discussed a move to central bank digital currency. Now, a point worth noting is why they would want this move. One reason is that they can inflate the currency to the moon. Everything is just numbers on a screen, so they can add some zeros whenever they want, which just devalues the currency that you and I hold. They're doing it with fiat anyway, but at least with fiat, there are some physical limits. Another reason to push central bank digital currency is that there is then centralized control of transactions. And I know you're probably thinking, well, don't we have that anyway with a national currency and taxes? But we really don't. If you have cash, there's always someone who wants it, so you can use it to purchase goods and services, even if the government wouldn't want you to use it. But as we saw in both the US and Canada in recent years, the government will freeze bank accounts of those who kick against the goads, which says just as much about banks as it does about government. But at least they can still use cash if they have it. With a digital currency, all you can do is barter, and this would keep you out of 99% of physical marketplaces. And with this, we would see the crony capitalism in America reaching its full realization, where big business becomes indistinguishable from the ruling government. We already see an economy inclined to this, with many forms of wealth redistribution to major corporations that play ball with the government, preferential legislation like we saw in 2020, and of course big dollar lobbyists. And so when the world's largest asset manager would benefit from runaway inflation leading to a cashless society, you better believe that they're going to use their assets to push this agenda. Because, and this is a point worth hammering home, a move to central bank digital currency must be justified in the public eye, and they know that there will be a lot of pushback. But if runaway inflation gets bad enough, central bank digital currency will be sold as the cure. And it should be no surprise that just as the government tries to force two parents to have to work to survive so the state can indoctrinate their children in state-funded schools, the government also tries to weaken American industry so that they can indoctrinate the currency into inflation. If America is producing wealth at a rapid rate through free market industry, the government can't inflate as quick, because inflation is when there is an excess of currency and a lack of production. So when the government can stifle that production, they can then tip the scales in their direction by printing lots of money. 2020 was the largest scale tip in a long time, but the push hasn't stopped. And the elites in both government and big business are getting impatient. They want digital currency now. So this is something that we're seeing, okay? And I know that up to this point, this has all been a recap. But I want to lay the foundation to firmly establish a motive here. Inflation is the easiest route for elites to justify a cashless society. So that's what they're holding on to. That's their ultimate means to their desired end, which is globalization. One global currency and eventually one global government. But don't be fooled. This one global government will be an indistinguishable mix of politicians and big business. So when the world's largest asset manager, BlackRock, comes to this realization, they see themselves as being part of the one global government. And I promise, the more that I put pieces together here, the more everything will start to make sense. But we need to start at the beginning of BlackRock working to destroy American productivity. Innovation Homes is a publicly traded company spun off from BlackRock, and they're the largest landlord of single-family homes in the United States. While most people are getting interest rates between 2 and 4% for a mortgage, Innovation Homes can get billion-dollar loans for around 1.4%. Innovation Homes makes offers for houses almost exclusively in cash, which is another leg up in a competitive market. And Innovation Homes only owns around 15% of single-family homes in the US, which is still a lot, but they focus on inexpensive single-family homes built since the 1970s in growing metro areas. They ignore the more expensive move-in ready homes, so they're depleting the number of houses that might otherwise be obtainable for younger working middle-class households in areas where people can easily find high-paying jobs. And while the average family will look to buy a home when they need one or when they can afford one or get a good paying job in an area, Innovation Homes is able to buy up large amounts of homes before a bunch of people move into an area. Needless to say, this not only destroys the average person's upward mobility, but it stifles their ability to ever afford a home, to have a family, and even when they can afford it, it drains them of a significant amount of wealth that should otherwise be put into their family. So, like I said, pushing two parents to work so the state can educate their children is not something BlackRock is apathetic about, because BlackRock sees themselves as eventually indistinguishable from the government. And they're already moving in that direction. So, I mean, why else would they be trying to cripple the next generation that would otherwise be investing their excess wealth with a company like BlackRock anyway? But this doesn't stop with America. A push for global governance doesn't end with America. So let's put a pin in this right now for the time being and go into a short story. Goldman Sachs in Greece. Greece had issues and they went deep into debt, which came to a critical point in the early 2000s. Goldman came in to rescue them like a lead balloon to a skydiver. Goldman loaned Greece 2.8 billion euros through a currency swap, but they gerrymandered the futures prediction and profited $600 million for themselves when they were merely supposed to be helping Greece. In just 4 years, Greece ended up over $5 billion in debt. So what happened? Well, Goldman knew that either the International Monetary Fund would bail out Greece, which is roughly 40% funded by the US taxpayer, or the European Central Bank or European national banks would bail out Greece. So did Goldman help Greece at all? No. In fact, they almost doubled Greece's original debt. Another story. Argentina took money from the International Monetary Fund to try to deal with a debt problem going all the way back to 1958. This started as a fairly small loan that has since ballooned to about $44 billion. But the IMF couched this as a huge rescue plan that led to Argentina being swallowed up into a deeper hole than ever before. Thank God that Javier Milei is now leading the country, but needless to say, he's got quite an uphill battle. But the point in sharing these stories is simple, and this is where some of the dots will start to be connected. A destabilized country is a jackpot to investors looking to make a big profit and gain a foothold in the government of a country. As late as 2015, Goldman Sachs has even said a new government is needed in Greece due to their financial problems. And Bank of America Merrill Lynch backed up that statement. And while that might be a perfectly rational thing to suggest, I mean, I don't know Greek politics or anything, we can't overlook the fact that Goldman was a major catalyst in their destabilization. So now, getting back to the issue at hand here, BlackRock plowed UK pension funds into Putin's war chest. Okay, BlackRock plowed UK pension funds into Putin's war chest. BlackRock took pension money from the UK and used it to build up the immense war chest that Putin used to invade Ukraine and Crimea. This was no different with Crimea in 2014. But before Putin could really invade Ukraine, something else had to happen. The US had to step off the global stage. So Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, not only supported Biden in the 2020 election, but even encouraged more spending because he said inflation is low, which is laughable to any American who either works or goes to the grocery store, even back in 2020. But to no surprise, Larry Fink has been called one of the most woke people on Wall Street, and he famously wrote an open letter to companies that BlackRock invests in, pushing for the removal of board members unless the company toes the progressive line on climate change. Yeah, Larry Fink is a pretty fitting name. And I don't need to get into it now because it really is not the focus of this investigation. But climate change legislation is one of the ways that American industry is stifled and inflation is exacerbated. Only Larry Fink isn't doing it by legislation, but rather by throwing his weight around. But that doesn't discount the influence on the legislative side because there is a revolving door between BlackRock and the Biden White House. Now, Biden's economic team can be divided roughly into two groups. The first lasted roughly 2 to 3 years, and this included working on COVID, infrastructure, and the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Now, one former BlackRock executive is Eric Van Nostrand. He was the head of BlackRock Research for Sustainable Investments and Multi-Asset Strategies. Currently, he is the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy in the Biden administration. His work includes advising on economic issues involving Russia and Ukraine. Another former BlackRock employee is Michael Pyle, who was hired as the chief economist to Vice President Harris, then became Deputy National Security Advisor for International Economics at the White House Security Council. A little over a week ago, it was announced he's stepping down. Pyle also worked in Hillary's 2016 campaign, and he worked in the Obama Treasury Department. Politico called Michael Pyle the most important economic advisor that the country has never heard of. In fact, when Pyle was only Kamala Harris's chief economist, Pyle said his work for Harris goes beyond economic policy. And he's also very liberally minded, but Politico has a wonderful bio on him. And you might notice a name on this page here, Brian Deese, yet another BlackRock guy. Brian Deese was the global head of sustainable investing at BlackRock, and he was named Biden's national economic advisor. He was also part of the Obama administration and served as deputy director of the National Economic Council, but he stepped down from politics in early 2023. Now, you might be thinking at this point, okay, but these are just people skilled in a particular field who get involved with politics. But they all push for sanctions on Russia, which would seek to distance the world from the only superpower not playing ball with the deep state. They all push the environmental social governance agenda of BlackRock that would speed up runaway inflation, and they all support US politicians who are going to be weak on the global stage. And believe it or not, even Obama was weak on the global stage, despite what the mainstream media will tell you. And he has a former BlackRock employee to thank in part for that, as does Biden. Wally Adeyemo is the former chief of staff to BlackRock CEO Larry Fink. He's currently the Deputy Treasury Secretary under Biden, and he was selected as the first president of the Obama Foundation from 2019 to 2021. Adeyemo is very involved with sanctions enforced against Russia, and he's very involved with trying to get foreign regulators to cooperate with those sanctions. Again, divide the world against any country not playing ball with globalist policies. And I don't think it's exactly out of line to suggest that Russia is the only global superpower who isn't willing to play ball with the New World Order. But Adeyemo's work goes further because not only is he trying to isolate Russia and pit the rest of the world against them, but he's also tried to surrender U.S. trade superiority to China. Adeyemo was the chief negotiator under Obama for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I haven't heard that in quite a while, but I'm sure that rings a bell. If you recall, back in 2016, Trump, Hillary, and Bernie all said that they would withdraw from the TPP. The simple reason is that individual trade deals between countries are more advantageous for the US than multilateral deals. But the fact that Trump, Hillary, and Bernie all hated the TPP should give us some indication here that it was doomed to fail. But why? Well, it opened up a vacuum for China to write the rules of global trade. And they failed miserably because China's proposed plan was called the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or the RCEP, but it has significantly less economic benefit to participating countries. So it failed, but TPP wasn't great either. But let's move away from conjecture now and get into BlackRock's direct involvement in Ukraine. Back in September 2022, Ukraine President Zelensky met with BlackRock CEO Larry Fink, and this should bring up memories of Goldman in Greece. They discussed how to revive the country's shattered economy, which BlackRock helped to destroy by funding Putin's war chest. And they discuss how much of the money to rebuild Ukraine's economy, estimated between $100 billion and $750 billion, would come from donor countries in the form of grants and long-term loans. And you might be thinking, well, this sounds perfectly reasonable, except Ukraine's Reconstruction Bank is being set up by BlackRock and JP Morgan. And this was discussed in Davos, where they just had the World Economic Forum meeting. I mean, alarm bells should be going off here. Here comes BlackRock and JP Morgan to save Ukraine. Yeah, and hey, what do you know? BlackRock said the Russian invasion of Ukraine would lead to higher inflation, complicating the ability of central banks to curb price pressure, exactly as it has, because U.S. economic advisors, quite a few of which were previous BlackRock employees, were pushing for well over $100 billion to go to Ukraine of U.S. taxpayer dollars. So in all of this, what is BlackRock's goal at this point? Well, the destruction of Ukraine has been sufficient enough for BlackRock to move in and take control, just like Goldman in Greece and the IMF in Argentina. And it helps that on Transparency International's corruption index for 2021, Ukraine ranked 122nd out of 180 countries. That's not a list where you want a high number next to your country. So infiltrating their political sphere is easy. So now BlackRock is looking for tensions to ease. This came out of Davos when they said that they're looking for the risk in Ukraine to drop before investing. So make no mistake, BlackRock has positioned themselves to fund the destruction of Ukraine, to instigate the destruction of Ukraine, and then to exploit that destruction for profit and power, while also further separating Russia from the global superpowers running headlong into a globalist agenda. They did this by first funding Putin's war chest, then weakening U.S. politics and mangling U.S. economic policies, and now they're encouraging and demanding runaway inflation while also pushing Russia into the villain role. So their hope is this: to have an economic takeover of Ukraine, to use that leverage to pull rank in politics, to set up a war against Russia, to cripple the U.S. and drive the U.S. to a cashless society with other countries to follow, of course. And then BlackRock would be firmly planted in a one world government when the people are beaten into submission, their enemies are destroyed, and all political, economic, and military power is consolidated into a single global centralized body. My encouragement to you with all of this is the same as always. Find a way to locally source food and other necessities, start a garden, have some chickens if you can, and move away from a dependency on society beyond the local level and take care of your health. Get some sun, get vitamin D, touch some grass, and know that in the end, Christ is king. We may be afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. If you'd like to support the channel, I'm starting the Patreon back up with new tiers and packages, so head over there and check it out. And if you'd like a link to all of the sources I used in this video, that's linked in the description. So God bless and have a good night.